How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the Dugout Discussions Podcast, Fantasy Baseball Weekend Recap. It was a busy weekend in fantasy baseball. We've got a lot to cover on the show tonight. From my player of the night to talking about Aaron Judge's impressive start to the season, to waiver wire, to hitter matchups I like, and to two-star pitchers I like, and much more. So why don't we get started with my player of the night? My player of the weekend, and it is Spencer Schwellenbach of the Atlanta Braves. Schwellenbach had a really good start on Friday night, going 8 shutout innings, a career high in innings pitched for him in a game. And this Schwellenbach, if you would like to see me post my rankings on the community tab, please let me know that in the comments. But Schwellenbach, he was not ranked in my rankings last year, or when I updated him last week. I update him every week. Like I said, if you would like to see me post them down below in the comments or in a community poll, not community poll, but a community on the community tab, please let me know down below. Schwellenbach will be in my rankings. He'll be the biggest riser in my rankings going into his next start. Now, Schwellenbach is rostered in a lot of leagues, and so is the next guy I'm going to talk about tonight. And that would be Aaron Judge. He has had an incredible start to the season. It is bonkers how good Aaron Judge has been to start 2025. And here's just a few stats. Going into Sunday's game, Judge was hitting .369 with 6 home runs, 17 RBIs, and OPS over 1,000. If you have Aaron Judge or Spencer Schwellenbach on your fantasy baseball team, I don't advise trading them. Hold on to them. The only way I would trade them is if you're going to sell high on both of them to start and you want to see what you can get in return. But I don't recommend trading them because you're going to regret it down the road, especially when the Braves get Spencer Strider back, because that's going to take pressure. That's going to take the pressure off of a guy like Schwellenbach, and you might see him be a player of the weekend, player of the night more often. Now we get to my waiver wire, part 1. And the first guy I'm going to talk about on the waiver wire is a guy I talked about last week, and he was under 20% rostered. He's over 20% rostered now. Can we try to get him to over 40%? It is first baseman of the Tigers, Spencer Torkelson. I told you in the preseason, in spring training, and before the season, I had a really good feeling that Spencer Torkelson was going to have a huge season for the Tigers this year. And what has happened so far? He's hitting. He's playing every day at first base right now because Gleyber Torres is injured, and they shifted Colt Keith back to second base and put Torkelson at first. And Torkelson had the game-winning hit today for the Tigers, a 2-run double. If you need first base help because you have a guy that's struggling in Yandy Diaz, or you have Jonah Bride or somebody like that, or maybe a guy like Nolan Shenuel, who is, I'm not going to say not trustworthy, but doesn't have the track record that we've seen Spencer Torkelson have previously. And I would feel very comfortable putting 6 to 7% of my fab budget on a guy like Spencer Torkelson. My number 2 waiver wire ad is Rangers reliever Luke Jackson. He is a third as of recording this, and I obviously understand that the roster rates have probably either gone up or down. But at the time of recording this, I believe Luke Jackson, and Torkelson was 24.4% roster, but obviously that roster rate is probably gone up by the time this video is going to be out. And same with all these other guys and their roster rates. They probably vary depending on what platform you play on and if they've already been added or if they're still on waivers. But I would highly recommend adding, if you need help with saves in your league, add Luke Jackson. He is the primary closer right now for the Rangers. And highly recommend adding him. Next guy is Heston Kierstad of the Orioles, who is 3.5% rostered. And that's absurd. He needs to be rostered in a lot more leagues because he's getting a lot of playing time right now with Colton Cowser being out for another 4.5, 5 weeks. And if he keeps hitting, I don't think he's giving up his spot in the lineup. Though he might be seeing a little bit less playing time when Colton Cowser comes back. Because you still got Ryan O'Hearn that can play the outfield. Got Cedric Mullins, who's not going to give up center field. So, but he's a speculative ad for right now if you need help in the short term. And the last guy, and the guy I'm going to talk about in another segment later on, it is Rocky starting pitcher Chase Dollander. 2.8% rostered. He just made his major league debut today, and he won in his major league debut. So therefore, I think out of these three guys I just talked about, including now Chase Dollander, which makes 4, I think Dollander is the one that is the must add out of this group. And when I mean must add him in any league size, any league you're in, doesn't matter. Add Chase Dollander. I talked about in the springtime how I thought he was going to break camp with the Rockies. I missed a little bit on that, but he's up now, and I don't think he's going back down. I think he's going to stick, and the next guy to get called up is probably going to be a guy that had a real good chance of being on the opening day roster for Colorado, and that was Zach Veen, which I would he's the one player I didn't talk about a waiver wire. He is a stash for me. He is that long-term stash because he will be up probably June or July, maybe earlier. Never know. Injuries do happen. Players do struggle. But I'm also going to talk about Chase Dollander in another segment, like I said, later on. Now we get to my 3 favorite hitter matchups this week. Number 3, the Tigers. They got 3 games against the Yankees and 3 games at the Twins. I like both of those hitter matchups for the Tigers, especially the one at home against the Yankees. Because that one gives you a perfectly good chance because, I mean, you might see Clark Schmidt because they're talking about around this time that he is, and Clark Schmidt's another guy that I'm not going to talk about on waiver wire, but if you need a starting pitcher, I would stash him in your IL if he's available. If he's not available, don't worry. Because there's 3 other guys later on in the waiver wire segment that I will be talking about. But I do like all 3 of the hitting matchups I just told you about. 2 start pitchers I like. There's only 2 of them. It is Dustin May of the Dodgers, who goes against the Nationals at Nationals Park, and then at home against the Cubs. Dustin May looked pretty good in his first start back for the Dodgers. Now, I'm going to say I would still be cautious that they're going to slow move him along since he's coming back from injury. Since he's coming back from Tommy John. They're going to slow move him. There might be some starts that get skipped because they don't want to take the risk of him being hurt and missing time this year. And then the other one is Shane Moss of the Rays. And Boz goes against the Angels at home and the Braves at home. I don't want anything. This is the one where for May, I like both of those turns through the rotation for him, both those starts. Boz, the only start out of the 2 starts, I'd rather have him for the Angels than have him against the Braves. Because the Braves, even though they're struggling to start the season, we could see Sean Murphy. He could be activated off the injured list. And they still have Matt Olson. They still have Jared Kelenic. They still have all these other guys. And their pitching's good too. So, I mean, if you want to start him in both, go ahead. But I'd advise against starting him against the Braves. The reason he's on the 2 start pitchers I like is for that start against the Angels. Now we get to hitter matchups I do not like this week. And there's 3. The first one is the Rays. They've got, yes, I understand they got 3 home games. And they've got 6 home games this week. 3 against the Angels, 3 against the Braves. I don't like those hitting matchups they have against the Braves. Because you're probably going to see Schwellenbach. You're probably going to see Smith-Shawver. And you're probably going to see Grant Holmes. And the Angels, that's I don't know what to think about that matchup. Second one is the Reds. And the Reds have a tough schedule next week. They've got 3 at the Giants, 3 at home against Pittsburgh. That Giants 3-game set, that's in a pitcher-friendly ballpark in San Francisco. And just go back and look at the first series of the year for the Reds. They played the Giants, and what happened? The Giants pitching stood out, and it was like a sore thumb for the Reds. They struggled to get runs, and this is coming from a Reds fan. That is also the same thing as a Ray. I'm a Rays and Reds fan, so it's tough. And then the third hitter matchup I do not like is the Braves. The Braves got 3 games at the Rays and 3 games against the Phillies. All 6 games total on the road. I don't like those hitter matchups at all. Now, here's my next set of waiver wire. Before I get to the beat the breakout. So my next set of waiver wire guys, I have 3 of them, and they're all 3 pitchers. The first one is Cardinals starting pitcher Matthew Liberatore. Under 2% rostered. Excuse me. Liberatore had a good first start, gave up a couple runs, struck out 4. I was impressed with his strikeouts, though. And I think if you want upside out of the two other guys, and Liberatore, who I'm talking about right now, Liberatore is the best one out of the group to give you upside. The other two, yeah, they might. One of them might become closer if their current team's closer struggles. But the next one I'm going to talk about is Rays reliever Mason Montgomery. He is widely available, only 9 point, less than 1% rostered, which again, I can understand why. Not many people know about Mason Montgomery. Kid throws 100 miles an hour. And I think if you have Pete Fairbanks, we know Pete Fairbanks' injury history. And I would advise that if you have Pete Fairbanks, I would advise to pick up either Mason Montgomery, Edwin Uceda, Manuel Rodriguez, Kevin Kelly, somebody else in that Rays bullpen. Because if Fairbanks goes down, you're going to need somebody that can step in, and maybe it's a closure by committee in that situation if Fairbanks does go down. But you get somebody else in that bullpen that has potential to get saves or holds or get saves and go multiple innings. And the last guy I'm going to talk about is Mets reliever Reed Garrett. Breakout year last year for Garrett. 0.8% rostered. I kind of understand why. At the same time, I don't. Reed Garrett needs to be more rostered because say something happens to Edwin Diaz. Reed Garrett would then probably step up into being the closer of the Mets. And you want saves, even if Diaz doesn't get hurt, but he struggles. We've already seen the Pirates send their closer down. Say you had Bednard, and you need somebody that can get you saves or holds. Reed Garrett could be that guy, or I'll give you two other names. In shallow or deeper leagues, or 12 teams and above. How about that? Here's two other names. One is Pete Fairbanks of the Rays. And if Fairbanks is available in your league, highly recommend putting a bid in for him. And then the other reliever I'd go after is Justin Martinez, who picked up his first save of the year last game. And then two position players, Tim Tawa and Thomas Sajacy, who Thomas Sajacy I'm about to talk about in a second, and beat the breakout. Tim Tawa just got recalled from AAA because, as y'all know, Ketel Marte is on the injured list, and it's a hamstring injury again for Ketel Marte, which, shocker, I think we're all used to that by now for Marte. And we don't know how long Marte's going to be out for. And we all thought when he went on the injured list that it was going to be Jordan Lawler getting called up. But here's the thing. I think the Diamondbacks want to slow play the whole calling up Jordan Lawler. I don't think they want to do it yet because they don't want to chance Jordan Lawler struggling like he did last year. And now we get to beat the breakout. And how this works is I have three names. Sometimes it's four names. Tonight, it's three. And the way this works is Beat the breakout is basically you pick these guys up before they actually break out. So the first name on here is, and I told you I was going to talk about him again, it is Chase Dollander of the Rockies. Dollander, like I said, made his first start. So today, first career start, and he got his first career win. So therefore, and he's, like I said, these roster rates have probably gone up, but as of recording this, he was 7.3% rostered. Obviously, that's probably gone up by now, but I highly recommend adding him because if you don't, you're going to miss a chance for a big time breakout. And he's probably going to end up being the ace of the Rockies staff. And yes, I know what people are going to say. I'm scared of adding a guy that pitches in Coors Field half the time because of the altitude, the humidifier. I can understand that, but Chase Dollander, we saw in the spring how good he was. So that shouldn't steer you away from adding him. Second guy is Cardinals second baseman, number 5 prospect in the Cardinals organization, Thomas Sajasi. Again, that is Thomas Sajasi. 8%, 0.1% rostered. Just recalled from AAA the other day due to Nolan Gorman being placed on the injured list. Now, we don't know the exact timeline of a guy like Nolan Gorman returning to the Cardinals. So JC's probably going to be around for a minute, for a little while. And again, if you need help in the middle infield, because they say he's going to be reserved, I don't believe that. I need to look at a stat line, or somebody from my community can pull up his stat line from his first major league game today and tell me how he did. But Thomas Sajasi is somebody you need to add before he officially breaks out. And same thing with this last guy. I talked about Cam Meisner's teammate on the Rays, Jake Beckham, last week on the show. If you missed it, go back and watch, because now I'm talking about Cameron Meisner, who is getting a lot of playing time, and he won a spot on the opening day roster thanks to Richie Palacios getting injured. And Palacios should be back within the next month, and same thing with Josh Lowe. But I think Cameron Meisner's about to have a huge breakout, and you don't want to miss the opportunity on a Cameron Meisner breakout. So again, the 3 guys for Beat the Breakout this week: Cameron Meisner, Thomas Sajasi, and Chase Dollander. And I will have another fantasy baseball dugout discussions, fantasy baseball podcast on Tuesday afternoon at 12 p.m. No, the reason this episode is being done, the live stream is being done for weekend recap on the Dugout Discussions podcast for fantasy baseball, is being done tonight, is because I have stuff I'm doing off YouTube tomorrow, and also I am working on trying to get North Florida softball coach or baseball coach, North Florida softball coach Jeff Conrad, or North Florida baseball coach Joe Marcadante, or the softball coach Jeff Conrad on the podcast for Thursday night. Watch out, look out for updates on that on my other social medias, my Twitter, my community polls on YouTube, community tab on YouTube, which I have 2 community tabs up on my YouTube. Highly recommend voting on them. Also, down below in the comments, leave your thoughts on this episode with your questions about who you should add off the waiver wire, what trade should you make, who should you drop, and any other questions you have. But that's going to wrap up tonight's show. For Alec Pecado, I'm signing off for the Dugout Discussions podcast, Fantasy Baseball Weekend Recap. Have a lovely rest of your Sunday night.